Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item are minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held Monday, October 1st. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is a delegation from Erin Davidson, the Executive Director of the Austin Heights BIA, and I'll just ask Ms. Davidson to proceed to the podium. Or another representative.
Yeah, it's going to be me, sorry.
No, it was very clear in the agenda. It's to be Ms. Please.
Good afternoon, Mayor Stewart, fellow council members. I hope everyone had a great summer. Sorry, I do feel like a giant doing this. All right. Thank you for receiving our delegation today as we present our renewal proposal for the Austin Heights Business Improvement Association. My name is Owen Coomer, and I am the manager of the John B. Pub and current president of the BIA. I'm joined by Vice President Roger Koch, who is an accountant, also our treasurer, Wayne Tullis, who is one of the original board members, and Erin Davidson, our executive director. Austin Heights means a lot to me, as I've lived in the area for over 25 years. I've enjoyed a successful experience since high school that prepared me for university and participated in numerous activities throughout the North Coquitlam zone, playing soccer, baseball, even riding horseback in Blue Mountain Park. I am proud to call Coquitlam home and am passionate about my community. Erin apparently calls me the poster boy of Coquitlam, as I truly live, work, and play in Coquitlam. In my role as manager of the John B. Pub, I have become involved with the BIA and have been in a position to see firsthand the dedication of the board and the commitment they have for making a difference in Austin Heights. During the 4 years of my involvement, I have witnessed a positive change as the goals of the BIA are realized. Goals that include safety, vitality, quality, promotion, and an overall community feel. We have beautification measures that include street banners, litter pickup, and graffiti removal. We have introduced a Daisy Day festival and strive to make the area safe with security patrols and other measures. At our most recent AGM, our membership voted to continue building on our success by approving the budget that has been included in your handouts. I am so excited and passionate by the I'm excited and passionate about the continuous excitement of being part of such an awesome group that I'm dedicated to the cause and hope that you will support the future of the BIA and approve the 3 proposals that are listed in front of you. Thank you. And if you have any questions, we are here to answer them.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Coomer. Thank you.
Hope that was light. Short, bittersweet.
Well, you did say you'd keep the 3 minutes, and it shocks us all that you did.
I know, exactly. I was practicing at home in front of a mirror with a stopwatch, you know.
Okay. TFI. Councillor Nicholson with a question.
Councillor O'Nicholson. The Irish heritage, just you can't let go of it. Can you give me, you said your annual meeting, everyone voted in favor of the budget, or not sure you said everyone, but
yes, everybody.
Everybody voted in favor.
Well, that came, yes, that we,
So,
yeah.
Let me phrase this in the most complimentary way possible. How much greater turnout did you have than we have for a municipal election?
Yes. Good question. We had actually our best turnout yet to our AGM meeting this past time, and I think a lot of it is just due to the fact that for 5 years we've been striving to build a better community. We've been going out. Erin has done a really great job of introducing ourselves to the businesses, being involved, saying hello, the meet and greets, so on and so forth. That every year it seems to be growing, the amount of people that are actually showing up to our AGMs and our meetings. So it's been great, and I actually believe that we're going to get it growing and growing and growing, where we can't have it in the John B. Pub's boardroom anymore. It'll probably have to be somewhere we'll have to rent. So
your political history follows you. You didn't answer the question. Didn't answer the question, but he made us feel better.
Well, the thing is that
history, Your Worship, is I wasn't going to point that out.
I think there was more people out at the AGM than voted for me for mayor in 2008.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, on behalf of council, want to applaud the work of the Austin Heights BIA. We've all watched Austin Heights struggle over many years, and it is now on the rise. It's we think Austin Heights is going places, and it's largely because of the work of Erin, Davidson, and a whole bunch of other volunteers, and I'll even add you into that, Owen. So I want to thank you all on behalf of Council, and wish you very well.
Thank you.
Oh, I was only doing that so that Councillor Robinson could get her thoughts together.
Yeah,
Go.
it took a while. It's just a slow Monday. I'm very interested in going forward, because that's always what you have to be doing. What are going to be the top 2 or 3 issues for you moving forward as you move into, because you've been building, which is great, and you have more to build, but what do you see on the horizon for the BIA?
That's a good question. I'm going to pass that along to Erin Davidson, our executive director. I'm just the poster boy. I'm just the token wave guy. So she has all the answers.
You are. Now let's get a woman here who's going to actually answer the questions.
You want to speak to the man in charge, or the woman who knows what's going on?
No, it's great having such a great board, actually. That's one of my great, actually, privileges, is to work with the numerous faces that have come and gone on our boards through the last year, so it's been wonderful. And to answer your question, what are we planning for the future? When we took a look at our list of accomplishments, which we include in your package as well, we were kind of, we always feel like we need to do more, always feeling that pressure.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do? What more can we do? And how can we improve the area? And so we compiled that list, and we went, oh my goodness, look what we have achieved. And in doing so, when we were taking a look at the future budget then for the next 5 years, it was decided by the executive that probably the most efficient way to really continue to help the area grow would be to build on what we've already accomplished. I mean, because we couldn't, I think to keep that pace up is probably unrealistic for the next 5 years. So now we've implemented so many different activities, and the Daisy Day Festival and our Refresh the Heights event and such, that we really want to really build on that and build our capacity and build the promotions and marketing component of our BIA and that type of thing. And certainly continue to build on that community feel, which is really an important aspect for us all, the twofold community, our business community, member to member, as well as the bigger community. So we feel that the Daisy Day addresses that on some level, and those are probably some of the components that are probably highest on the list.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Just a word of congratulations to the good work you're doing. And I note that this week is the beginning of Small Business Week in British Columbia, and it's a safe bet that all the members of the BIA are small businesses, and small businesses represent 98% of the businesses in British Columbia and employ over 1 million people. And I think it behooves all levels of government to support small business. And what we can do at Council here to support this particular small portion of the small business, we will do. So congratulations on your good work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any further questions? Is that your line? I don't know. I'm just up here again, Yeah, exactly.
Keep practicing. Councillor Sikora.
Okay, tell me. You send out tax notices to the different businesses in there. What percentage of them pay, and what percentage that they resent?
And that's a good question that I'm going to pass along to Wayne Tullis. He has a lot of the information already listed.
The tax rate that Coquitlam charges in that area is approximately 2.34%. Out of that, approximately 0.095% is our BIA amount. Put it into simple terms, if you have $1 million property, approximately $955 goes towards the Austin Heights BIA.
But you didn't answer the question. I said, if you sent out 100 notices, how many of them pay, how many of them don't pay?
They all pay.
100%?
They all pay their property taxes. It's on the tax
they pay
notice.
Property tax.
We don't send it out, the city does. It's on the tax notice.
And the city gives you a percentage of it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm back.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep.
Anything else?
No.
No.
I think we're good. Is it good? Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much again. All right.
Thank you, Owen. Thank you all. No, they're still in. Madam Clerk.
Item 3 is report of General Manager Planning and Development related to building permit issuance, processing time, monitoring, and improvement. And we have introductory comments from our General Manager Planning and Development and a presentation from our Manager Building Permits Approvals and Manager Building Permits Inspections.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and just a few brief comments from my perspective. And actually, if you just indulge me, I'll tell you a little anecdote that I think sort of puts this all in context. I was chatting last week with a lawyer I've long known that works here in the Coquitlam Center, and he'd mentioned he had a client that had relocated to Calgary 7 years ago. Recently came back to Coquitlam, came in to see him, reestablished business contact, and she expressed to him she could not believe how this community has been transformed in those 7 years. So obviously a lot has happened, and maybe we don't fully realize it because we're here day in, day out, but there's been a whole lot of development and construction activity in the last 7 years, which coincidentally is also the period of time I've been with the city too, so I don't know if I can take blame or credit, but in that, we're going through some exciting dynamic times, but not without its problems. And there's some issues, there's some pressures, and there's some concerns. And that's really the purpose of this report this afternoon for committee. There has been discussion at council. Staff had committed to look into this. We've been taking steps and to report back to you. So we're aware of these concerns. We are dealing with them, and we will continue to deal with them. We're not there yet. There's still room for improvement, but we will persist in resolving them. So with that, if I could just turn it over to Jim Bontempo, our manager of plans examination, and Doug Vance, our manager of building inspections, and the two gentlemen have a joint presentation. It'll just take a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Good afternoon, Mayor Stewart, members of council. The brief overview. Oops.
Oh, I'll go.
I'm too far.
Here we go.
My apologies. Just a brief overview. The Building Permits Division was restructured, and this organization was approved by council based on a cyclical review in 2010. From the cyclical review and reflecting the workflow in our department, the division was reorganized with two managers, one responsible for plans examinations, my compatriot, and the other inspections. Currently, there are 30 regular full-time and 8 TFT and auxiliary positions in the Building Permits Division.
One of the key components of that reorganization was a recommendation out of the report that talked about a way of creating a permits management group that could evaluate and monitor the ongoing activity in terms of building permits. And what we created was a permit management group, and that's been active for about 2 years now. And it's comprised of Doug and myself and our 4 supervisors from each section of the division. The PMG meets weekly on Wednesdays, and what we do is we evaluate the current status of all our applications, and we have 6 permit streams, and we deploy resources and look at ways of dealing with permit turnaround times as they fluctuate and change. And in your package, you received a sample of the permit division tracking summary. That's just an example of a report that we print out every week. What we do is we look at our applications in our computer system, and we look at the number of business days that we have in front of us. So we take out statutory holidays, vacation, etc. We look at the amount of person days that we have available to us, staff, and we come up with a number that is accurately reflecting the permit turnaround time. So what you see in front of you are the number of business days for each of the permit streams, and I won't go into detail as to what those permit streams are, but the two biggest important ones are, of course, our single-family building permits, which is the part of Burke Mountain that is exploding right now, and the other one, of course, is the very large commercial permits. So with that, what we do is we make comments about how to deploy staff differently through the week, and we work through that on a weekly basis.
Oops. I keep wanting to go ahead. The next slide is the construction activity from 2006 to 2012. It became quite evident other than 2008, 2009. There was a slight turn down there. 2010 ramped right back up again, and the numbers became quite heavy. Once we get to now, we're dealing with, last year was a record year in construction value of $394 million. This year, we're projected to pass that. Again, it's a busy time, and with the busy time comes the challenges, as Mr. McIntyre had alluded to earlier. But overall, it's good. I mean, we're in a positive light, and it's been trending up since 2010 when the PMG came into existence.
So that's all good news, but what are we doing about it? And what we did was we created short, intermediate, and long-term strategies. Key points of the short-term strategy, which have been implemented for several months now, is one that I mentioned already, which is the monitoring by the PMG group. Recruit vacant positions quickly and efficiently and fill those positions. Implement a more rigorous pre-screen process for large complex projects. The old practice was that a very large project would come in, it would go into the queue, and a few weeks later it would get assigned to a file manager, and the person would pull it out and have a look at it and pull out what we call big showstopper problems with it and start dialoguing with the applicant. What we're doing now is we're taking a look at it within 1 or 2 weeks. We're assessing the standard and the application requirements, and then we're calling the applicant in for a meeting. And in some cases, the applications are substandard, and we're dealing with it in a much shorter time period. So that's helping as well. On the single-family side, we're batch processing permits. We've got enough staff experience now and enough wisdom behind us over the last couple of years in Burke Mountain that we've created very good relationships with the main players up there. And what we're attempting to do is, through our inspection staff and our plans examiners, is realizing that maybe the level of detail that we need to put some of these applications through is not warranted. We have a level of comfort with some of the builders. Many of the homes are repeat homes. So what we're doing is batch processing. We're having a look, and we're doing a very cursory review to catch the main things, and then we're passing it to the inspection staff to catch major code items in the field. And they're coming back to us saying that, quite frankly, they're not really finding that many code infractions out there. We're also utilizing some resources from the development planning group. We have been training some of their staff to look at some of the things that we normally look at, and we're using some of their staff to review the zoning component of our applications. So the zoning piece is being looked at by development planning staff, then it's sent to us for a code review. Traditionally, our staff do all of that check, but we're using resources as they appear available. And of course, overtime is available. Like all overtime, there's a limit on it. Staff have families and other time too, and we don't use that as an answer to all issues. It's a stopgap measure. It helps, but our real goal, of course, is to complete our vacancies and to have staff adequately in the positions. And on a good note, we've just last week completed hiring 3 more plans examiner 1. So we're looking forward to those staff coming from other municipalities and hitting the ground running with us. So we're quite excited about that.
One thing, just to speak back to what Jim mentioned, One of the things with the batch processing is relying heavily on cooperation and buy-in from the larger developers out there and builders. And it puts a lot more onus on the inspection group. So we're conscious of that as well. We had early buy-in from them. We brought them in. We had dialogue with them. And they saw it as a good thing, too. So hopefully that works out that way. Some of the intermediate term actions, we're attempting to keep open dialogue and communicating directly with all the builders and developers out there through groups such as the UDI, Urban Development Institute, Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. We're actively involved in our own organizations like the Regional Permits and License Committee, so we keep lines on what other municipalities and areas are doing. Building Officials Association, Plumbing Officials, all those organizations, we try and keep plugged into those as much as we can. We want to keep working with the developers and consultants on the key components to a successful application. And again, we brought this up at the Urban Development Institute meeting of September 12th, and kind of a, here's what you can do to help us help you to create a more successful application that goes through the whole process much more efficiently. And the last and the intermediate is to complete the implementation of the recommendations from the cyclical review report. And we should be having an implementation update on that cyclical review report, how far we've come prior to the end of the year in a report to Council.
Long term, we're working very closely with the Human Resources Department. We're looking at our staffing levels, and we're being realistic about that, and we're making sure that they're adequate over time. As you well aware, the building industry fluctuates and changes yearly, and technology and other aspects of the building industry will be changing in the next few years as well. We've been working on a strategic work plan for the last 2 years. It is complete, and we're anxious to implement it, and with that means working with all our staff in our division closely to make sure they understand goals and objectives and why we're here doing what we do. And we're quite excited about that. The other piece is something that we've been working with ICT now for almost 2 years, and that's our inspection booking. Right now, we use approximately 5 hours a day of clerical time to actually download voicemail and book inspections, as well as part of it is automated but never really was accepted by the contractor group. The user group, with improvements in our computer software, we're going to be going to web-based inspections. And we're really excited about that because then contractors will be able to go on the web 24/7, book their inspections. The backup will be to phone in and book it via our integrated voice mailing system. That will free up 5 hours a day. Electronic plans examination. We're currently in the process of demonstrating and demoing several packages that are available out there, and we're going to continue looking at what's out there and keeping an open mind towards technology and how it can help us do our jobs better and more effectively.
And we talked about this one earlier, so I won't go into too much detail there. Another thing that we're looking at too is process efficiencies, and Jim had touched on it earlier. We're looking closely at removing any unnecessary details that we don't really need to check. So we're really trying to streamline that process. The last one is continue to strengthen our relationships with internal groups, and there's many examples of that. We want to continue working with them. Our economic development manager, we work closely with them. Sometimes you get a business wants to move into a building that doesn't fit what that business wants to do. So we'll work closely right from the beginning with them to try and help them through that process. There's a couple of other examples is our facilities planning and construction group. We work closely. We're in early in the design process of a lot of major projects. A couple of them are coming to completion right now, but we are in right from the ground floor, right through the request for proposal and to the end. Another example is our Leisure and Parks group. We were trying to work closely with them at all times and try and create as good a relationship as we can. so that we can see any problems that could take place early and try and get them taken care of as quickly as possible. That's the end of this presentation.
Well, thank you very much. I know Council's been looking forward to this report. We all hear, of course, the anecdotal references that individual builders or property owners bring to us. So I have a couple of questions myself. One related to the batch processing of subdivision homes, if you will, groups of homes. I'm wondering if there has been ever an analysis done of the relative workload involved in processing and inspecting one of those batch houses compared to, say, a one-off house in the rest of Coquitlam someplace.
You mean like sort of a post-mortem review of how much time it takes to...
How much time, how many re-inspections, how much hand-holding do we sometimes have to do, perhaps?
Right. Well, every move we make out there is logged on the computer, so it'd be very easy to go back and have a look at how many inspections do we do, how much time. I mean, I can tell you that inspections, how many would you say on a home?
From an inspectional point of view, Your Worship, I can say that with the larger tract builders, it's a pretty quick process, really. We're under their minimum inspections that they would. The bylaw requires there's 2 inspections and then a re-inspection fee may be applied. If we go to 1, I'd say it's generally 1 when you're talking the inspectional side. So there's, with the one-off builders, it's a little bit more that you're trying to help them through the process quite a bit. And we try to do that, but limit it as much as we can, realizing that the inspectional staff are limited to what they can do.
So you're probably looking at 5 or 6 hours of staff time to actually process the application. You're probably looking at a total of, 10, 12 inspections for a single-family home, and that's a good builder. Probably double that with a first-time homeowner building their own home.
Okay. And, of course, their permit fee is about the same, so...
Permit fee is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has always struck me that this seemed like a natural to go to the batch processing. It seemed obvious. We do it with townhouses, of course. We don't do a separate processing for every unit. But once we separate them and they're not attached anymore, we require this separate processing. And it seemed to me like a natural, and I think Council will support that. Ultimately, it's clear that we're going to have to continue to refine our processes, I suspect, because we're going to see a tremendous amount of the big stuff down here, and we're going to see big stuff in other areas as well. But as well, we've got some major developments on the horizon. Are we comfortable then that this process will keep us at that 4-week processing time, will keep us at the appropriate levels for inspections as well?
I think we are. We're committed to keep these strategies in place. Our goal is on the single family is 2 to 3 week turnaround. That's our goal. That's what it was before the building boom in 06, 07. That's what we'd like to be at. The large, complicated commercial applications, now with our staffing levels, the building code part is probably about as lean as it's going to get. What tends to be the stumbling point for the large commercial projects they are multi-departmental issues that go on. For example, there's the legal portion of their work, covenants, rights of way have to be registered, and we're dependent on the applicant to be prepared and ready and have that part of the critical path working in concurrent while we're doing our work. And sometimes they aren't concurrent, and we run into delays where we in fact are waiting for other portions to catch up. The other part is off-site servicing, very complex. We're into some very large, complex structures, buildings, things that we've never seen before in the history of this municipality. We're looking at casinos, we're looking at hotels, we're looking at all kinds of future projects, including integrating them with the Evergreen. And the off-site servicing is critical, and quite often the applicant overlooks something, or the development servicing group has come back with some serious comments on that. So again, it's very complex, and the code part the part that Doug and I are responsible for is just the one component. So what our goal is to look at internal relationships between all the departments and make sure those are running smoothly.
If I could, just to directly answer your question, Your Worship. Yes, we will continue to monitor and refine these processes as necessary, and I think that's part of the bit of a culture shift in the division and with the staff, is that it's a more proactive problem solving. Some people are learning their way, but we're not just going to get to a new set and figure, that's it, we're in nirvana. No, it is ongoing improvements that we'll be bringing to our systems, our software, our staff. No, it's an ongoing basis.
Wonderful. And my last one, and it's probably more a comment. I have a bit of a background in building inspection, and it always seemed that, it is the case, in fact, that everything that gets checked, everything that gets reviewed at plan check has to be reviewed again in the field. Because that's just the plans for. You have to make sure it was built to plan and was built appropriately. And so I want the assurance, obviously, and I think I know the answer, obviously, but that this isn't letting anyone off the hook. We're always going to be inspecting, and we're going to be inspecting at the right stage in every case. That on site, every component will be inspected as it was before.
I think it'd be best if I answer that one, I guess, and I can assure Your Worship that, yes, that will be the case, as directly as I can.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. I'll be a little more critical. The fact is that, I got back on council here in 2005. Things have not improved in the planning department. I'm sorry. But, whether you go back to 90s or to the 2000s, the amount of building permits that we had, things were bad then as far as getting permits. Things are bad now, and things will continue to be bad. Because I don't know why we can't go back into the 70s, 80s, and 90s when we had the Westwood Plateau built, we had the Town Center built, we had Mayfair Industrial Park, Pacific Reach Park. Talk about huge building projects. And you know what? We had a policy that, if from the public hearing to a building permit, 6 months. If you didn't get a building permit within 6 months, the planner was in my office. As God made little apples, he was in my office telling me why it wasn't happening. Okay? And what we have now, some more managers, some more supervisors. I mean, we're blowing out our minds with managers and supervisors. I'll tell you, I don't know where we're going. And then you mentioned application come in, and a few weeks later they go into a queue. What does that mean? A few weeks later they come in a queue. What happens when the application comes in before it hits the queue?
The practice that we use, which is identical to every municipality, is that all applicants should be treated fairly, which is that the date that their application is made, it's a formal process where it's input into the computer and it's date stamped. That date stamp signifies the day that they actually made the application. And quite often, a lot of the problems that we deal with are in speaking to applicants saying that my application was made on so-and-so, where is it today? And that date is a very important date. As you can appreciate, what would happen is if I were making an application, I would be upset if someone who came after me were given a date that predated me and that their work was reviewed before mine. So it's a very sensitive number, and it's one that we take very seriously. So that's what the queue is everyone is in a chronological date holding pattern.
How long is it in a queue before it starts to get a little action?
Well, that's the part that always changes. The idea is to be able to look at it very quickly. Now, on the very, very large projects, it traditionally was several weeks. Today we're saying that we're looking at it within 2 weeks. But that's just to open it up and have a look at the issues involved. If we open it up and find all sorts of deficiencies and problems, then the process begins, and the chess clock goes off and the work goes back to the consultant, and we wait for the consultant to return with a revised set of drawings.
Yep.
So it's back and forth.
And that's what we created here at the City Hall, is that octopus. You know why you get these substandard applications? Because they know they'll take weeks to go into the queue. So the architects will tell you, they put in a temporary kind of application, they know it's wrong, but it'll take weeks for them to put in a queue, so they put them in. And that's exactly what you're faced with now. And that has not been resolved in this City Hall. It's been going on for years. It still goes on. And I don't know when we're going to finish getting this horse off from the wagon and getting on the road. You know, I mean, really, you're going to get substandard applications because of the system that we have within our City Hall.
Your Worship, perhaps if I can address that point of Councillor Sikora's, and I know this is there's some history here, and it's not all positive. I guess what the system that we've put in place, this early pre-screen that Jim and Doug have talked about, is to get at that, is to deal with that problem. What we're saying is to the applicants and their consultants, if you come in with a complete coordinated package, we'll look at it quick, check, make sure it is complete, and then we'll get it into our system, and we hope to have the resources and the efficiency so we can process that through in a reasonable time, so they feel that they don't need to play games. They don't need to do a drop and run. For those consultants that come in with incomplete applications, and you're right, they'll do it just so they can say, I had it in here September 1st, and where's it been for the last month and a half? And I've been in enough of those meetings that I know that conversation. And so what we're trying to say, Councillor Sikora, is that we'll look at that very quickly. We'll do a quick pre-screen of the application, and if it's not complete, if it's not coordinated, if it's missing pieces, we'll give it back to them so they can do it. And so we're not wasting our time with incomplete applications. We can focus on those that have gone to that extra step to make sure it is a complete bona fide application. We'll give that priority so they can get through. So hopefully we can start changing sort of the mindset and the behavior around here, because it is very frustrating all around. I do agree.
Okay, couple more. We have public hearings on a Monday night. We quite often give it fourth and final reading, to rush it up. To do what? To sit on somebody's desk for weeks. That's what we're doing. I mean, it's ridiculous, to go through it. Now, the thing is, you said the work plan, you've been working on it for 2 years. Sure to God that the department, whoever the department is, I don't care what department, doesn't take to work on a work plan for 2 years to get things right. I'm sorry. It just doesn't wash with me. So, those are the things, and I've got a few more, but I'll tell you, it really, really burns my butt, because I'm not the only council member that's getting a lot of calls on building permits. Other council members are getting the same kind of calls, I guarantee you. But I'm now frustrated to a point where I'm saying, okay, now how long will it take to get this octopus loose and get something done? I'm not saying that you guys are not working hard, but when are we going to streamline it to where we're going to get some applications at the right time and to where nobody's screaming for building permits that they've been waiting for? How long does it take? Another 6 months, another year? When?
Well, I'll answer a little bit of that before I refer to staff. I actually followed up on one because a local builder had contacted me and said 11 weeks for a permit, and I'm still waiting. And so I asked staff to follow up, and the permit that they were still waiting for was actually 5 weeks, and it turned out that that's one of the builder's staff who was at the counter most regularly perhaps may have dropped the ball or something, and it does tend to happen that sometimes we will probably hear for the next 6 months about how bad permits are, no matter what we've done to fix them. And so I recognize that. At the same time, I do want us to keep a very tight look at the permit processing, but I suspect that we're going to hear these complaints even after we've fixed it. Well, Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I think in that case there was an overlap of processes. I think because of the lot they had bought had an odd configuration, they had to go to the Board of Variance, so that just added some time to the 5-week single-family permit processing. But again, we realize it's a problem. it's something we want to deal with. There will be that tracking system, which we actually will be providing a copy of that to council monthly along with the other development stats, so you can see those numbers over time. And if we're not making what we're saying we're going to make, well, I'm sure we'll hear about it. But our objective is to deal with that, to get the staff in place, systems in place, so we get those numbers down.
I understand. I hope that 6 months from now or a year from now, we're not sitting here listening to the same thing again, huffing and puffing, that there's work being done and we're streamlining it. That's all I'm going to say. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the report. I've had discussions about it with you guys over the last couple of years about ways to improve, and I like a lot of the processes that you've done, the target dates. But I also look at this as a two-way street between us and the development community. And it was talked about the pre-screening. I'd like to see that pre-screening on large applications be done within the first week. But on the same side, what I'd like to see that if we're getting these incomplete applications being dumped in, that we send it back with also with feed, because when a developer, not all of them, but some are more reticent to do that than others, that takes up staff time. That pulls staff time away from where they could be elsewhere improving the system. So I think what we have to say to those people, you want us to move forward, get things out quicker, you have to work with us also. It's a two-way street. So I would recommend within 1 week reviewing those applications when they first come in. If there's deficiencies on them, like you said, they don't go in the queue, they get sent back. There should also be a charge fee for the time involved looking at that, because once again, they'll get the message that they're wasting time, and they're going to see us, as you guys are with this program here, improving things, looking at things quicker, getting them back answers quicker. But as the mayor said, sometimes applications or permits delayed, and I've dealt with some residents who had complained about the permit, and one of the issues is that their lawyer had not submitted all the papers in that were supposed to be submitted for the development permit, and when we found that out, the person said, oh, I'm sorry. So it's not always the permit delayed by us, but we need to be more efficient, and I've pushed on that for a number of years now. I like the game plan you're doing here. I think some of the targets could be even upped a bit better. Batching, I think that's a good way at the time to help clear out some stuff. But once again, I think there's a two-way street here between us and the development community here. If a developer's coming in with 30 single-family homes in one lot to be inspected, they're not building 30 single-family homes in one. They're just taking them, inspecting them, putting them on a shelf. They could break that down to us in blocks of 10 and make it easier on us. So there's a two-way street here that I want you to communicate out to them, that we'll do some batch planning, but you know, if you've got a 30, 40 lot subdivision, you're not going to build 10. You're going to build maybe 10. So by the time they're halfway through, they can be the next ones be through, and it's fairly simple. So I think there's some ways that they can help us, you can help them, but we've got to understand that if both sides aren't working together, we're not going to be as efficient as we possibly can be. So that's the one issue I have. So that's one thing I'd like you to take back and try to work with. I still think a feed, I mentioned this to Mr. McIntyre about incomplete applications. I think that'll raise some awareness on them to correct that issue. Because you're right, they have been playing a game because it's been taking too long. We've had problems. But we need that to stop, to save those resources. I'd like us to see, once we get past 10 days on single-family permits, getting towards that 15, that alarm bells start going off, and we try to bring that down. So is that, you know, just as we're creeping up at 15, we should be pulling in more resources, doing what we can to keep that brought down. So that's one area I'd like to see some action on. And on large family projects, I'd like to see, you're doing 25 to 30, I'd like to see more aggressive, maybe 20 to 25, right? I know that's would be a bigger goal. I know it's a stretch. I know. I'm throwing a challenge out there to you, and I know you're smiling about that, but you know that's what some of these are for. But if we can get that two-way street working and get the other side of the equation, because the mayor pointed out here, it's not always our fault that a permit isn't getting out on time. So the one last comment I have is you have it on electric plans examination. I've been asking about this for 2 years now. So when do we expect to be able to be up with the capacity for electronic plan checking? Do you have a time frame in mind?
Through the chair, Councillor, I don't know. ICT is working with us on setting up samples. I'd like to say within 6 to 12 months, somewhere in that range. That's the feeling I'm getting from our staff who are going to be doing the demonstrating of it and are testing it. So ICT is working with us to set up the hardware.
Okay, because I would like to see that open up as soon as possible, because then we can do two things. Applications that come in through electronic means, electronic process can be plan checked without people. And you can create two streams. People that, because a architect with that software will charge X amount of dollars more, but you're going to move through the process rather than a manual. So it gives you an opportunity to split into two streams, giving people an electronic stream to move them through faster because they're paying more for it. So I think that's an area I'd really like to see you guys crank down on and get that out there and get that up and running. And I think it'll come out as an advantage. I did have one other thing. You talked about web-based inspections. Love the idea. I think you got some good responses when you had that. But I also want to get out the communications out to, you got the large builders, but also to the medium and small builders to get them that message out there. So work with communications and make sure we get that message out there that's available in a very good manner so they can pick that up once again electronically, saving some issues, saving resources that we can reallocate back into other processing.
Through the chair, Councillor Asmussen, we are working on that right now with ICT. We have corporate communications are involved right now. They have been since day one. We've got a plan that's already taking place to advertise that once it comes out. And again, we're targeting hopefully by the end of January 2013. So.
Okay, perfect. No, I'm pleased to hear that. I like the direction. Just a couple little tweaks I'd like to see in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. And I appreciate Councillor Asmussen's comments about the challenging you to be a bit faster, but I also want to caution that you gentlemen know how to permit these things and how to inspect these things, and we're not going to cut any corners. And we need to be really clear that when we're caught in that very difficult place, that my preference is that you take the time you need to do a good job. So that's the piece I want to emphasize. I too have some questions about the electronic capabilities, and I'm wondering if ICT is properly resourced to make this happen, and if that's something that they're not properly resourced, and if it's something that this council ought to be taking a look at. Because if that's really going to make a difference in terms of timing and in terms of efficiencies, then maybe we ought to be looking at that as a priority as a council to support moving this forward. Because if it's going to be 6 to 12 months and all we know is that our numbers are going to continue to go up, you're going to continue to just be in this crunch. I don't know that realistically, can we really keep up with the pace? And if this is going to make a huge difference, then maybe we ought to be making sure that ICT is properly resourced to get this online. So do you have a sense of how much faster having this web-based capabilities will be?
And when you say web-based, on the application?
All of it, all the electronic
part. Well, the electronic booking of inspections will be an immediate savings in terms of clerical staff time. It'll make things more efficient. I mean, right now, our inspectors, if you book an inspection, they're there the next day.
Okay, that's efficient.
We pride ourselves on a one-day turnaround on inspections.
I was going to go.
And there's the odd time when maybe the staff are at a conference or something, it might be 2 or 3 days. That's never really been our problem. Our inspectors are working, long and hard, and they have a lot of pride in their work, of course. The plans examination piece, the electronic plans examination, with that comes, it's not just as simple as, of course, having applicants submit an electronic version and us looking at it on the screen and saying, that looks, picking out the deficiencies. There's other issues with things like authenticity of engineering seals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's the maintenance of the versions As you can imagine, right now, paper goes back and forth, and at the end of the day, when we issue a permit, there are two official sets of documents. There's the set that stays in the office, and there's the set that must stay in the field. And that's what the inspector relies on. And those are stamped, marked, sealed, dated, every page, so that there is no fraud.
No room for error.
No room for error. As you can imagine, pulling pages out and putting them in is something that we watch for. So the building bylaw is clear that a structure shall comply completely with the approved plans, and that's our job. So plans examination will help, but like all electronics coming into an office, it will be a slow improvement. It'll be something that will have to be tested and tried. They'll be moving forward. They'll probably be moving backward as well from time to time. But the idea is to be open-minded and try it. 20 years ago, we didn't have our Amanda tracking system.
Now, if I recall, I think Delta, one of those communities in the south, I think they have, are there other communities that do plans web-based? Are we good? Would we be first to do this?
Through the chair, Councillor Robinson, I'm not aware of any at this point. I know that some are in pilot projects at the moment. Some accept some documents, and the Regional Permits and License Committee did a survey on this recently. Not many are doing it. As a matter of fact, it was just a couple of years ago when for digital, Jim had talked about letters of assurance. A digital seal technology is almost in its infancy, really, to verify authenticity of that seal for an engineer, an architect, whatever it may be.
Okay.
So it's quite new.
Okay.
There was one little point I wanted to bring up in regards to the online inspection booking, and I have to give the kudos to our ICT department because they came up with an alternative method. The Amanda upgrade, our permit tracking system, was a few years out. They gave us an alternative to do it through our IVR system, so They deserve a little bit of credit for finding that solution for us.
That's great. All right. So I have one other question, and that has to do with our ability to predict the ebb and flow, because that's been really the crunch, right? Things sort of slow down, and then we've got all the staff, and then it's like, oh, things pick up again. And so, can we get better than a crystal ball? I mean, or do we just have to rely on this crystal? I mean, we see way down the road when things are coming in, before they come to first reading, and can we predict sort of, okay, 2 months out, we know it's going to be coming because we see all of this in public hearing. We can sort of predict that it's going to start exploding, or I don't know. I'm just checking in with Jim. Maybe you have some predictive abilities here we didn't know about.
Through the chair, if my crystal ball was better than others, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But, no, I love this job. I truly do.
Smart man, you are.
And no, that is a good question, because the simple answer is, well, there are economists, there's CMHC, there's the real estate board. I read all that stuff, as do the guys. You sort of try to track what's out there and the information environment going forward. But you did say a couple of things there. I think actually we might want to go away and talk with the development planning group. Like, we do know with rezoning is coming through, and DPs, because there is a lag time, like through the rezoning process, and there's the DP process, and then into the building permit. So there's kind of a heads up. We kind of know coming over the horizon what might be there in some of the major projects. Clearly on the single family side with the subdivisions, that too is an indication, but there's a lot of subdivisions that have been approved, and they sit there half developed for a while. So it calls on us in our department to have those internal, discussions and looking ahead in coordination ourselves, so we know as projects pass on down through the line, it's a bit of a heads up to those at the tail end here.
And even some of the larger developments, there's often pre-conversations with our planning department about what's possible, and anticipating that something's going to come online. We don't know quite yet what. We don't know exactly what kind of zoning. We might not know exactly scope, but we know that it's big, whatever it is. And that might be, again, a heads up that there's some activity happening.
Yeah. And if I could, Your Worship, just the other thing I think our group here has been pretty good at, and it might get overlooked, is we've been quite successful in building up what I call a stable of auxiliary and temporary staff, and these are typically people that have long careers in the industry or semi-retired, but they're available to us to come in. And sometimes I fear we might just be relying on them too much as a crutch, so we do need to have the proper full staff contingent. But it is nice to have a group there that we can call on, and they can come in, and they're a tremendous asset. They can be there within a week and help in those really peak periods.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. And just to comment on the predictions, it is, you see at the same time in the last couple of weeks, continued reports from the CHMC that that sales of the parachute has popped and things are really slowing down. And then you see housing statistics, housing starts. Still, the most recent statistics still have pretty robust housing starts, and you wonder, is Coquitlam a special case? Is there a disconnect? I don't know. Who knows? Do you know?
Special case.
Is Coquitlam a special case?
Your worship, if I could, I too often ponder that, particularly when you look at some of the numbers and some of the checks I did last week. And like we're trending to almost 2,000 housing units in Coquitlam, building permit issuance. That's huge. But what's behind those numbers? And went and looked at the last monthly stats that we provided for development, and it's quite telling. It's almost a one-third split across from Northeast Coquitlam. So you think of greenfields, ground-oriented, single-family and townhouse, city center, concrete condo towers, and the southwest where you get a bit of a variety. So I think Coquitlam is in quite an enviable position in having sort of three market niches, if you will, within a community. That's things are happening out here. There's a buzz about this place. Obviously the coming of Evergreen line, but there's a lot of other good things that are happening here. So you cover off three bases. You're in an area that's north of the Fraser, no tolls. It's happening. It's going to happen here. It may turn down on occasion, but I think over the medium to longer term, it's a pretty positive future.
Good, thank you. Now, I have one more sort of general comment and question. And let me preface it by saying I don't have the specific knowledge about the way your department works and about the way the development industry works to say that you should be doing this or that, but it sure sounds like you're headed in the right direction. So I congratulate you for that, and obviously very aware of the situation. Now, a couple of weeks ago, when I was talking about affordable housing, I happened to, I think at the time I mentioned that one of the ways we can move that subject along is to be efficient in our approval processes, and a representative of a developer who's involved in medium-sized projects all around the Lower Mainland and some larger ones said that, in fact, this should be an issue with Coquitlam, and I want to know if what he said you can vouch for and its accuracy anyway. He said, in dealing with Coquitlam, we really should look at ways to let the market respond more quickly to the demand for housing. He said that it takes just under 3 years from a time a developer acquires a piece of land that's not zoned for multifamily housing, but that he wants to have zoned for multifamily, to see it through the rezoning process, the development permit process, the building permit approval process, the actual construction, and the final inspection. He says the builders are scheduling half of that project's time for the construction and half for municipal approvals. And he suggested that that's too long for the approval process, and that that's something that needs to be worked on. Now, is that your experience? And if that 3-year window is correct, how does that compare with other municipalities? And do we have a goal to get that overall process, overall time that process reduced in some way?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor. I'll probably let Jim speak to the process when it talks about an official community plan amendment through a rezoning, through a development permit. That's a process that our other half of our department deals with. I can tell you that in round numbers, construction of a high-rise takes 18 months. Construction of a 4-story walk-up is about 10 to 12 months, maybe 14. Construction of a single-family home, about 3 to 6 months. So that's what we deal with in terms of our plans examination process of getting it through. I think that a building permit for a very large project, let's take one of our recent high-rises in the town center, probably about, the code review is probably 1 to 2 months, and that's back and forth with revisions, but then add to that off-site servicing, legal, development, permit checks, and so forth. You're probably looking at 6 to 8 months. So we can speak to that part.
So 6 to 8 months, and then added to that would be the rezoning, all that stuff. So are we in the ballpark then when we talk about a year and a half for the municipal approvals and a year and a half for construction?
Mr. McIntyre.
I think that's really an excellent question. My gut tells me we probably are somewhere in that range. There might be some projects that have gone through more quickly in that, others might have lagged a bit, but if council will indulge us, let me take that away, because I'm going to take that back to the department as a group, and let's look at the whole system from rezone to DP through the development servicing to the construction side, because at the end of the day we break it into segments and steps in the process, but for the applicant and his lenders, it's one project.
Offline, I'll give you the name of the guy that I talked with, and I'm sure he'd be happy to talk with you.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'll start off by telling you that I'm not planning to do anything, and you won't see me joining your queue, so I'm going to stay right where I am, and you helped me make up my mind to do that. I really appreciate the progress that you've made, and there's no question that there's lots of progress and more to come. I really appreciate it. I feel a little bit guilty because you always have time to talk to me when I come to see you about something, and I'll try to be a little less demanding of your time in the future. I think it was Mr. Vance who used the phrase, you're talking about batch processing, relying more on inspection in the field, and not finding too many major code infractions. And that raised the thought in my mind. So there's two kinds of code infractions, apparently, major and minor. And if I think of this in terms of my prior work as an auditor, one of the things auditors do is we don't look for infractions, we look for errors. And sometimes beside the error you write in CM, which means not considered material. But there's a point in the file where you begin to think, I have too many of those. So could you speak, there's a challenge here for you as there was for me, which is major code infractions are pretty straightforward. But you have to find a balance between getting the job done, getting the project completed, supporting the developer, the builder, and getting a quality product.
The process, through the chair, Councillor Nicholson, when I use that phrase, I probably used it a little loosely, and an infraction to our inspectors is a non-compliance to the building code. They're going to ensure compliance to the building code at the very end of the day. What we were speaking of, when we do our plans examination, for example, at the very beginning, the big ticket items that will cost the builder a lot and create possibly some conflict with the inspector in the field are zoning checks, setbacks. They've got a wall poured and our inspector comes out here and says it doesn't comply to the zoning bylaw. You got to move it. You got to jackhammer that concrete wall out and move it. Well, we want to get away from that as much as possible, so we do the plans examination so we have a set of plans to go by. If they make a mistake, it's in their court. What I was referring to is we now have shifted that responsibility to the inspection group, that maybe we're finding it later in the process. And for these major builders, please, we're only doing this for the larger developers who we have a lot of trust in, who we know are going to say, if we go out there, we're going to work with you in the future, so if we ask you to move this building, you're going to move it. to comply with the zoning bylaw, and so far we've had a lot of cooperation in that light. The other code infractions, we'll get them fixed. At the end of the day, they want us to pass it and grant occupancy, I would hope so.
So major is more in terms of how tough it is on everybody.
It can, some can be more painful than others, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So to be clear, we're still checking siting on all projects. We're not necessarily checking the railing height at the plan stage, because we got to check it at the building permit, at the building inspection stage anyway.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. I think we've come a long way. We've got still some work to do, and it's a nice problem to have, perhaps, the amount of development that we've got going and the amount of construction that we've got going at the same time. We want to make sure it's done right. So appreciate it. Okay, motion to receive would be good. Councillor Asmundson, Councillor Robinson, all in favor. Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 relates to Light the Hall 2012, and we have a presentation from our Manager, Parks and Facilities.
Ms.
Good
Reinheimer.
afternoon. My name is Kathy Reinheimer, Manager of Parks and Facilities, and I'm here today with Linda Baker, who's our Community Events Coordinator, to deliver an update for Council about the Light the Hall event 2012. You may know it's been scheduled for November 25th, so time is going quite quickly. The Light the Hall event last year featured a theme related to a winter wonderland. It took place in City Hall, in the lobby and in the chambers, and it was the theme was worked out through the special guests of the Winter King and Queen and their court. There were fire dancers, and within the hall and the lobby and the chambers there were musical performances, free family entertainment, including face painting and crafts. And the culmination of the event was the lighting of the displays outside. You may remember that the highlight of that was the Q wreath over the front door, as well as some lit banners along the building facade. We had lighting on the trees in the square. And then, as a continuation of the previous event at Lafarge Lake, we had some trees lit beside Lafarge Lake, and there was a display within the forest on the south of the lake that was intended as an expansion or extension of the lit lakeside pathway, very popular with the community. For 2012, our plan is to have a more traditional theme. Community feedback indicated a desire to have more a traditional seasonal event with Santa and his elves and the lighting of a tree. Rather than lighting a tree on the roof of City Hall, the option is to light an existing evergreen, so it'll be live, and just have decorations put on it in the corner of Buchanan Square. We're also looking forward to bringing in the Spirit Square stage. So we really have two plans. If it's really bad monsoon weather, we're going to pull back into the building, but if there's any way possible, we'll have tents out on both Buchanan and Spirit Square, and light the trees and some banner poles in Spirit Square. The other thing that we're going to do, just a slight change from last year, is that we're going to create more of an entry feature so that visitors arriving at the Fantasy Forest Walk by Lafarge Lake can have more of an entry experience, a welcoming experience from both Guilford Way as well as off the Innovation Center parking lot, where a lot of people were arriving. So I hope you mark your calendars. This event is November 25th. It's a Sunday, from 2 to 5 in the afternoon, with lighting of the displays around dark, about 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. It looks very bright and festive. I just want to point out that that's also Grey Cup that Sunday. In Toronto, the kickoff is at 6, so that means it's 3 o'clock here. And I read it and I thought I'd put that out there. There may be some families that will come, half of the family.
We wrestled
saying which half of the family will be coming with the kids, but just wanted to make sure you knew that. We were competing with another favorite pastime in this.
To the chair, yes, we wrestled with an available date and are kind of stuck with that one. But as you say, hopefully we'll get at least half of every family out for this event. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I really loved all the lights. Last year, I attended the event last year, and it was absolutely fabulous. So thank you very much. And this year's looks like it's going to be as well. I note that you're having the kinsmen come and serve hot chocolate and cookies, and I'm wondering if we ought to have hot dogs as well, something like that. The kids always love those, too. I realize it's not a meal time, but it's that 4 o'clock hour is kind of the witching hour, and when everyone's blood sugar is low, and I'm just wondering if it would be good to have something in addition to cookies. Thank you.
Through the chair, absolutely. We'll looking at adding hot dogs to the hot chocolate and cookies that'll be available.
My suggestion is don't add the hot dogs to the hot chocolate, but just it's not in my recipe. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Motion to receive. Robinson, Asmundson, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is report of General Manager, Parks, Recreation and Culture Services related to pet cemetery services. The recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
I'm actually going to suggest that the committee may wish to consider deferring receipt of this report until a meeting that everyone's present at. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer, to defer until all council is, or Councillor Reid is present. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is report of General Manager's strategic initiatives related to the Evergreen ALRT line update fall 2012, and we have introductory comments from our General Manager of Strategic Initiatives.
Your Worship, members of Council, staff continues to update Council on the Evergreen line on a regular basis. And since our last update in this past spring, there have been 2 significant announcements. The first is the construction of Lincoln Station, which was announced on July 19th, in which Coquitlam will receive up to $7 million in federal grant funding towards construction. This station will build on our current success and will encourage and shape new high-density mixed-use development in the southern part of our city center. Secondly, on October 4th, the province announced that the preferred proponent to construct the major guideway and related stations is SCN Lavalin. The province hopes to have a contract with them in place sometime by early November. Finally, staff continue to work on a number of initiatives as outlined in this report so as to capitalize on as many opportunities as possible on this considerably significant project for Coquitlam. Would be pleased to answer any questions if Council has any, Mr. Mayor.
There's two questions so far. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. It's always helpful to get an update and see where things are at. Certainly the public's very much interested in what's going on and where things are at, and also when they're going to have opportunity to provide comment. So that's a fair bit of a query that I have. On page 4 of the report, it talks about pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. And I just wanted to know when our advisory groups, like the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee, as well as the HUB, the Cycling Advocacy Group, at what point are they going to be brought in and informed of status, as well as consulted about their thoughts, ideas, suggestions for making sure that there is good accessibility for both those modes of transportation?
Yes, thank you for that question. I'll have Mr. Radnich answer that.
Actually, we're currently working with the province to try to schedule an attendance at the Accessibility Committee meeting as a follow-up to the staff presentation relative to an update. That was one of our commitments to the Accessibility Committee. But and the province has expressed an availability to come to any of our committees. So if we'd like to do that to others, we can certainly pursue that as well. And they're open to engaging council's committees as well as community groups as desired. So we'll certainly follow up on that.
That would be great. And I suspect Port Moody's in the same boat. They have, I guess, similar committees, and it would be, I think, helpful to make sure that those groups are consulted. So do we know how much of the guideway can actually accommodate cycling infrastructure? Have they got those maps out that will say, you know, here, here, and here, and we've got challenges here, here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here?
Your Worship, that's correct. There's challenges here, 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 and here. Yeah, as was outlined in the report, is that TransLink, independently of the province, commissioned a report to look at the Evergreen Line corridor, to look at cycling and pedestrian enhancements to try to facilitate incorporating them into the project. The challenge, of course, is that there's a budget limitation on the Evergreen Line and implementation, and also TransLink has its own financial difficulties. However, they have identified opportunities, and everybody's looking at how we can work toward achieving as much as we can for opening day, but also it'll set the roadmap for the future in terms of when funding becomes more available.
Okay. It's probably also cheaper to do it at this end than to have to go back and retrofit and...
There's definitely economies of scale that can be realized with implementing at least segments of it with the construction of the main project.
And you're advocating as hard as you can for as much as you can, right?
Your Worship, that's correct.
Great, thank you. I have one other question that has to do with the bus exchange and the bus loop. And in the report it talks about, from the city's perspective, this is an interim solution until the area redevelops. And that's great. I'm glad that we have that perspective, but I'm always worried about TransLink's perspective. And do they share that perspective, or do they have a different idea?
Your Worship, they are certainly at the table with us and co-funding this alternate look at how we might integrate transit into that local neighborhood. They're 50% partners on the study that's looking at it, and they definitely appear to be very ready and willing to consider alternatives. And they use examples like in Surrey, where they've done similar integration plans in conjunction with the city.
So that's a model that they're comfortable with, and we can at some point expect that we can move that direction.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, that's helpful. And my last question that has to do with financial implications, part of the report, we talk about maintenance costs for enhanced planted medians and column guideway lighting, and the cost of $75,000 a year for each city. So that's the North Road piece. And with growth that's anticipated for that area, can we assume that the growth in the tax base would help with these costs? That would be sort of covered off? Is that sort of how we would recognize these increased costs? That it should in the end, Ms. McLeod, sort of balance out that would come with the whole redevelopment and our increase, our lift from tax.
Absolutely, there would be enough growth that would offset that cost. Every year you have in the range of $1 million or more, but we would put that in as an added expense when it comes budget time, so you'd see both.
Right, but I just want to make sure that that as we read this, it's not, oh, our taxes are going to go up because of this. It's like, well, there's going to be growth, and that growth, in a perfect world, ought to sort of cover it off. And
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Reading through the report, two things that came to my attention. One that Councillor Robinson's just raised, which is bus interface with how they're going to integrate with the in Coquitlam. But my main one is I read through here and I now see the mention of park and ride, which I'm happy to see, because I know that in previous discussions it has been indicated that TransLink wasn't really interested in doing park and rides. That was sort of not a model that they had been pursuing as we move through, and certainly they haven't done it with the last line. And I'm just wondering, is this sort of a shift, or is this just based on public demand? Or I'm just wondering why we're now looking at sort of the options for possibly for park and ride now.
Your Worship, TransLink certainly well aware of this commitment to provide an additional 500 parking stalls with the Evergreen line, and it's part of the agreement between the province and TransLink that those 500 additional stalls be provided. So I think from a TransLink perspective, in discussing it with staff, they recognize there's a need for park and ride. It has a role in providing a transit service where the levels of transit service don't necessarily support users moving to transit. So for the Evergreen line, there will be a period where necessarily the transit service won't be adequate to always get all of the users to the facility on opening day. So definitely a role. As Council has previously brought forward as well, there's a need for park and ride in this case as well.
Yeah, and you sort of touched on one of my concerns, and that's certainly transit in the Northeast. It doesn't exist today. We can only hope that there may be some way of getting to the SkyTrain station once the SkyTrain arrives in 4 years, but past track record doesn't indicate anything is that it's certainly not going to move quickly enough, and that we will have people wanting to use SkyTrain, and their only method to get there is going to be using an automobile. And I'm just curious, currently we have a sort of I guess what I would say an adequate size lot at West Coast Express. Any idea how many spots we have there? I'm just sort of trying to get an idea. Are we adding more, or what have we got?
Your Worship, I'm advised there's 631 spots at that location.
So we're looking at not quite doubling that amount with the Sky, and that's also going to be spread between here and Port Moody, so not necessarily even all in one spot.
That's correct.
Your Worship, also there is some existing park and ride at Port Moody today as well, which they'd be adding to in a nominal way.
Right. I'm particularly interested where the last part of that section, it mentions maximizing shared use opportunities, and to me, maximizing shared use opportunities is to put it where it's accessed and shared at public uses. And I know there's been some discussion about in parking strategies about making use of residential parking during the day for other things, but to me, shared use parking isn't relying on a shopping mall to give up space or a residential to give up space. To me, shared use parking is doing something like building a parking structure where sports groups, or if it's, for example, if it is around town center, where community groups can use it on weekends and evenings, and commuters can use it Monday to Friday. So to me, shared use is finding a use where it's a true, where we don't have any overlapping. And so I would encourage you to continue, in those discussions with looking at opportunities where we can benefit in this area, because I honestly believe that we are going to find a shortage of parking in our town center area and around our recreational complexes. With a station in the parking lot of the Evergreen Cultural Center, I think parking is going to be a challenge up in that area when we have cultural events and sporting events. And to me, looking for a partnership of some sort in that general vicinity, I think would be a win for our citizens and for our residents who are trying to commute.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're doing exactly that, and we'll continue to look at all opportunities available to the city for consideration.
That's good. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. I just had some comments on the bus exchange loop at Coquitlam Plaza. I know that TransLink and yourself are working back and forth, but I guess my concern is also with the future growth ability and taking that into consideration, because as we build a station, as we grow as a city, if you take Lougheed Mall Station right now, has a very small limited bus loop. It is going to be at capacity right now, and we're not talking about increased transit services going in there. So what I want you to look at when you work with TransLink and you're doing about it an exchange there is to just not look at what the requirements are today, but moving forward in the future. The other comment was raised about park and ride. Well, park and ride is from two different points of view. People that don't use transit always talk about wanting park and ride, but if you take West Coast Express Station right now, out of those 630 stalls, not are all used every day. There's a vacancy rate of a large amount. And the other thing is we're talking about greenhouse gases and reducing congestion. When you create park and rides or expand a park and ride down there, you're creating greater road congestion getting in and out of there. If you look at the West Coast Express in the morning, especially in the afternoon, at the present levels, there's great congestion built up into there. So park and ride sounds like a great idea, but there's a lot of negatives for it. And it also takes away the cost effectiveness of TransLink providing bus service. If people are more taking their cars down and parking, not taking transit, you'll have less service, and you won't achieve the service levels in your areas to get people out of their cars. And that's been TransLink's motto for years, is that we'll provide the service, we provide big parking aids at everyone, we get that congestion, traffic, greenhouse, but we also get a reduction in ability of cost effectiveness on our bus system. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually want to echo a few of the comments here in a different way, though. I look at there's a slide on the screen right now, for example, that shows some of the decorative lighting that Richmond did, as well as some of the other elements that they've been able to incorporate into the Canada line as it moves up and down number 3 road at Lansdowne or so. And I want to talk about a little bit about the concern about the operating cost. And I want to make it clear that SkyTrain will cost us. It will cost us in operating costs to have SkyTrain in our community. It will cost us in capital costs to have SkyTrain in our community. It will cost us a little bit more to have a SkyTrain that looks nice, a SkyTrain that creates a neighborhood that feels safer as well. But that cost is less than the cost of building the roads that would be required to replace SkyTrain. I think we would all agree on that. It would also cost less than, and I think the improvements cost less than some of the other challenges that you have. Some communities that have large-scale graffiti issues or other issues associated with their transit lines, both in the Lower Mainland and in other cities across the world. And I think a little bit of effort put into trying to make sure that our neighborhoods that SkyTrain touches are as welcoming of SkyTrain because of what we've done with it. So I really support those. I think the improvements that Surrey did in related to SkyTrain as it goes through their community are something as well to look at. I've been able to ride my bike or walk pretty much the full length of Canada Line, Millennium Line, Expo Line, all the way through Surrey, and you'll see elements of that really make it an inviting neighborhood. So I, for one, will completely support those efforts and the discussions that we're having with Burnaby related to the North Road corridor. But I want to make sure that all of Council expresses our support for those kinds of efforts as we go through, certainly on Pine Tree, but also on the North Road corridor, because both of them, I think, will be really important aspects of welcoming business to our community and making sure that our SkyTrain routes are as pedestrian friendly and as friendly as possible. And that was it. No other comments? Motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 relates to the 2012 second trimester report, and we have some introductory comments by the Deputy City Manager.
Thank you, through the Chair. The second trimester report is before Council for information. We are making good progress on our 2012 business plan priorities. As summarized in the report, most of our key priorities for this year are on track. From a development perspective, as alluded to in a previous report this afternoon, it has been a very good year as well as a very busy year. And we are trending at or above the record development levels from 2011. From a financial perspective, we are on target for a modest budget surplus. And with that brief introduction, I'll turn things over to Council for any questions that you may have.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. Very good news. I think everything's coming along quite well, and I'm very appreciative of these reports and the better details we have on the construction activity and everything else that's getting into the reports. It's a good guideline to see where we're at. I know it's only for 3/4 of the year. Our business license renewals are projected to be less than what they were last year, so I don't know the reason for that or what the issues behind that. That seems to be a bit of a concern for me.
If I may, those are business licenses to date this year, so 2/3 of the way through the year, that's where we're at. So I would say we're probably trending towards a similar level from last year.
Yeah, I'd like to see growth in that number, though, to see a greater business license pickup. We've streamlined things. We've got a lot of progress on making it easier. So I would like to see that number better than that. The other position I'm looking at is just how we deal with our positions of vacancies, and we seem to have a certain amount of positions that are not getting filled in a timely manner, and we need to have a better review as to why that's happening.
If I may, through the chair, we did take those comments seriously when they were brought up at the last trimester review, and we have followed up with all the positions that had not been filled for a long period of time. I can say that they're all underway in terms of being filled. A lot of those were backfilled, but for whatever the particular reason was, staff weren't willing to make the decision to solidify the person or the particular job spec, and we've tasked people with doing that. And I talked to the manager of human resources last week, and we're well underway with resolving all of those positions now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, my question too was with respect to the business licenses, new and renewed, and I too was concerned, but I understand that we're not completed the year yet. But I want to follow up on my previous request as well, is that we do follow-up where those business licenses are not renewed. And for those who have come in and applied but not necessarily obtained a business license as well, I'd like our economic development manager to follow up with those issues. The other thing I wanted to ask about was the Parks and Culture master plan, about what the timeline is for that.
Mr. Dumont.
Thank you. Laurie isn't here today. What I can say is one of the pieces was they were looking at doing a strategic plan, and we're wrapping that up as part of a corporate strategic plan update that we're doing, and we're bringing a report forward to council actually next week. And the next order of business is to finalize the master plan. Those plans typically are quite involved and do take some period of time, and I'm not sure of the exact time frame that Laurie has in mind, but we can follow up and she can get back to council on that.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Once again, these continue to be my favorite reports because it just really provides us with some really good feedback about where we're at and where we need to focus. And I'm glad that Councillor Asmundson brought up the vacant positions, and because I flagged those too, because they sort of caught my attention that some of them are vacant for 42 months or for 59 months in one case. And I just wanting to know, I mean, I'd like to see those resolved, or at least some sort of explanation about sort of what's been going on. We're talking years that it's been vacant, and we keep funding it, but it continues to be vacant. Some of them, I understand, the position is being evaluated, but it isn't being evaluated for 60 months. I'm assuming that that's current. It's happening now. So I would like to see some sort of limit, or that, or practice, maybe not policy, but practice, that we're not going to let them sit vacant if we can help it. I appreciate that some of this is market driven and a challenge, but that there's some explanation that anything more than 10 or 12 months that we'll have some sort of strong rationale for either why we're keeping it, or maybe we need to evaluate the position, or we're just having a hard time filling it and we keep trying and not enough candidates. But just something a little bit more substantive than just it's been 42 months and it's still vacant.
Those are good comments, and we'll take that under advisement, and we'll be more proactive in terms of following up with departments when these lag.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, this has to do with one of the B priorities on page 12 of 14. It's the update regarding Glen Park. It talks about how the natural area pathways are completed, and indeed I've seen that, and the mayor took some wonderful pictures there the other day. Park open lawn area park open, lawn areas open, dog park fencing and access scheduled for completion by mid-September. So it's coming along very nicely. It's a very high, I'm raising this because it's a very high-profile project, and everybody has an opinion about it. And I just would like to get an update on when some of the other amenities are planned to go in there to finish. What's the schedule for that?
Through the chair, our plan is to get the plaza development on Pipeline done and complete over the winter, so it should be ready for a May opening, maybe a March opening next spring.
And that will complete everything at Glen Park then?
Everything that's in phase 1, yes.
Okay, so then there's other phases. What are the other phases, timeline for that?
The concept plan that came before council kind of was an overview of where the park will develop over the next 10 years. And so we don't actually have a timeline for the rest of the phases. It'll be dependent on when we get funding for amenity contributions, that kind of thing. So the assumption was that this project really, the first phase will start the work and get the plaza and the dog park and the open picnic area in, and then following that, the concept plan identified a range of amenities, including tennis courts, sport courts, that kind of thing, as well as enhancements to the trail and the pathway system.
Good, thank you for that. I was unclear on that. I didn't know that it all wasn't happening in a scheduled fashion over the next several years, but there's actually, it's an open-ended thing at this stage. Thank you. Good to know that.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask us to go back once again to the Parks, Rec and Culture Master Plan. I appreciate the distinction between the strategic plan and the master plan. The master plan's been topic of conversation at council for quite a considerable length of time. The phrase "has been initiated" means almost nothing to me. I don't know what that means. Is somebody engaged? Is somebody working? I really believe that somebody here should be able to provide us with some prediction of a timeline on this. And exactly what has happened. What's the difference between now and last time?
Mr. Dumont.
Through the chair, yes, we can certainly do that, but I think Lori is the one that needs to do that, and she's away this week, but I will follow up with her and make sure that she gets something to council.
Thank you very much.
I had a similar question. Actually, I'll leave my questions on. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Sorry, I didn't. Was that moved?
It wasn't, but that's all right.
Okay,
Don't
Robinson
actually
has
indicate in the minutes.
I understand.
Who moved in second.
All in favor, opposed, carried. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I just want to flag for council that you all got invited to the next homelessness and housing task meeting. Craig Lockhead is going to be presenting ideas of partnerships with the development community and others to that committee. They're going to be meeting November 2nd in this room, and I would like to urge council to join if you can and learn what we can. It's an opportunity to hear some really interesting ideas, and it just came through today in our Blackberries, and I want to urge you to make a note of joining us on November 2nd. Thanks.
Okay. Nothing else? Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.